And then the last thing I had was overtime, but I figured we can wait till we start the meeting. That's going to be more of a discussion.
Yeah.
How are you tonight?
Good.
All right. Just waiting for the degree level this week, so I can catch up.
I think I'm done with the other since it hit the right temperature.
It's supposed to be a fancy thunderstorm on Friday night. Some cold front's coming through and it's going to make it a real big thunderdome.
Great.
It's going to be awesome.
I was just reading in the paper today about black lightning they've just discovered,
Really?
where apparently maybe 1 in 1,000 lightning strikes might be black lightning. There's no, you don't see anything,
Uh-huh.
but it's a
Still
impulse.
causes damage?
No, it's an impulse of radiation, high energy radiation. Typically, it's only very high, so it impacts mainly aircraft. But you can get a lifetime dose of radiation in one strike.
Cool.
And you don't feel it. You don't know anything about it. And they're just,
The airplanes don't
Figuring this
insulate
out.
you from that?
no.
Wow.
We do all kinds of damage to the aircraft, too. It's fun stuff.
So they're it's something somebody just figured out, so I'm sure we'll hear more about it.
Almost.
Why don't you fix that clock then, mister?
That thing gets changed every week.
The electronic ones.
It's really about 10, 15 seconds.
Electronic
You'll start
and
by it.
wirelessly synced to this clock.
Kick it off.
And we'll buy a clock that changes the notes watch.
That's
There you
right,
go.
that's right.
All right, we'll go ahead and call our meeting here to order.
Aiken,
Here.
Bear.
Here.
Harris.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
Scarborough.
Here.
Henry.
Here.
Vice.
Yep.
How do we want to do our exec? Up front?
Let's go to executive first because we're paying Lisa to be here. Sorry. Love you, but
That's all right. I'm not going to take offense.
although we do want you to go join Bob and Giuseppe's and start our trivia game tonight because we're going to be a little late. Can you help us out with that? Can you go in there? We owe you some drinks for your for your thing anyway.
I probably can't tonight, but.
Oh, you slacker.
Okay, I'd ask town council move into closed session under 2237 11A1 for discussion, consideration of employees, more specifically town manager, town attorney. For 3, for discussion of publicly held, disposition of publicly held property, more specifically of the shed. Daytime, playtime building, and old post office.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Go ahead. I'll be back.
Okay, under 223712 of the Code of Virginia, asks that each councilman certify that only those issues that we went into closed session for were discussed, and they were all exempted as closed session items under state code.
Aiken.
Yes.
Bear.
Yeah.
Harris.
Yes.
Lee.
Yes.
Scarborough.
Yes.
Henry.
Mhm.
And Tobias.
Yes.
Great. All right. Mr. Tobias?
So the 5 directors coming out of closed session would be to direct staff to work with Councilwoman Harness in regards to the town manager position, to direct staff to work with Councilwoman Bear in regards to the town attorney position, which will be vacated middle of next month, direct staff to work with the town attorney on current lease negotiations, and to direct staff to ask Thomas to please relocate the excess materials from the deconstruction over to the post office building for possible use by the contractor in reconstruction of that building.
Okay.
If anyone has no objections, I would suggest that we are okay to allow our attorney to go home for the evening and thank her for her presence.
All right, thank you.
No objections, good.
No objection. Thank you. Have a wonderful night.
Yes.
Yes.
Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Lee.
Don't plan on going home early on May 6th. All right.
Nice.
Yeah, I just saw him cut through there too.
Know whether he was following the car in front.
All right, so I don't know where else to start other than where I know we can update. Jen and Rebecca and I went over some stuff today. I'm taking my notes. And we just tweaked some revenue line items. They're not perfect, and there's still a tweak or two that can still be done when it comes to developmental revenue, application fees, and inspection fees. And I've asked Marchant, since he has the best handle on possible development in the town, to come up with his best guess estimate and provide those to us as soon as he can. So just go over those. The new spreadsheet that you have today actually gives actuals through March 30th. So just to give you an idea of what we changed today on pages 1 and 2, we took out some line items that were just part of the program that we're not really utilizing. So if there were big blanks there, the odds are we probably took it out. If you want, I'll tell you what those were. If you don't care, I'll move on.
Move on.
So for application fees and inspection fees, lines number 313304 and 31300308. These are lowball numbers at $10,000 apiece. One of the things we're looking at, that is what Marchant's going to help us kind of finalize or try to get a better number on. And we're also going to make sure that our current inspection rates and our fee rates are somewhat similar. Because currently, if we put that $20,000 in revenue, we're offset the expenses by we put 20 in revenue, 30 in expenses. We want to try to get truer numbers on the revenue side so that it's not much of a loss. However, our thought process was we know we have some areas that we need to go back and re-inspect. So I foresee that probably being a loss for us this year somewhat because of some issues. Skipping down 2 lines to the other planning and permits. Again, $2,000, more of a placeholder than anything else. But Marchant will help us out with that number as well. Going down about an inch to rental income for the old post office. Rough estimate of, assuming the project is completed in time, it's 1,560 square feet. At $23 a square foot would give you a total annual rental of $35,880. We just chop that down to 90% of that in case A, we have to rent it for less, B, we can't rent it for a full 12 months or whatever. We can go more conservative on that if we'd like, or we can stay where we're at $32,000. But I thought that was somewhat fair. Rental income for 15026 Washington Street. I changed it to 0 based on council's kind of thoughts last council meeting, which is it's probably going to be our people renting there, and I don't think we can charge our own department rent. So I kind of changed that to a 0. If people don't think that that's a good idea, now's the time to speak because we need to get it inspected for commercial use versus governmental use and possibly. So is everybody here on board with possibly making a directive change or motion in May that we would like our PD down there effective ASAP or July 1st or whatever date we come up with? And Steve can work with.
I can work with Chief.
In the meantime, Steve and I were talking about this pregame. He can start talking to Chief about some of the things that are on the capital improvement line items that kind of jumping around here, but there's 3 or 4 items on the capital improvement line items request from them, from the planning commission, that we don't need to really put into a planning capital improvement side. We need to put into a relocation budget side. We know they're probably going to need a security system because they store evidence there. They're probably going to need a telephone system. They're probably going to have to re-outfit a locker room / evidence room / they're going to have more space there than they've ever had. So we need to come up with a budget, and I think now's the time to do it before the end of this fiscal year. I think we've still got some money in the
And
general
use some money
reserve.
this year.
That's what I'm saying. We've got some money in the general reserve still left over that I think that between, if you can get with Jim and Greg, and maybe me, you and Jim and Greg can sit down and talk about money, we can come up with, yes, we'd like to have a $60,000 budget to move, but okay, we only got $25,000 now. Can we make it happen with 25 and we'll work on it the next couple of years? So if everybody's on board with that, we can direct Steve and myself to start talking to them about what it's going to cost to do it.
And you might also want to look at, I think I mentioned before, the roof. Have that looked at.
That's listed as one of the things. It's not showing any visible leakage now.
Right.
It is missing shingles.
Right.
But that's not a code issue, that's a cosmetic. And I'm getting estimates for the code work and estimates for the cosmetic work, but, before someone went in, so.
Or it's all part of the inspection.
Well, right, but since he's not a roofer. I think that
Who's not a roofer?
the inspector.
Well, that's why she's getting estimates for cosmetic repairs as
Yeah.
well as functional repairs.
Correct,
Can we
but
trust
I
her to
think-
do that?
Right, I can, but I just want to say that we might want to have a professional look at the roof to give us the condition.
I'm sure the people who are giving us estimates on the
Yes.
repair work would be a professional. I would think.
I
Not
was-
sure.
Right.
I went through with
I don't
the
think she's
building.
hiring day laborers.
Yeah, I went through with the building inspector, and he did not see any visible sign of leakage. But the roof was listed as one of the cosmetic things that I will be getting an estimate on.
Great.
And is our building official, is he a professional?
He's a professional building official.
Oh, so he's a professional.
Yes.
Thank you. Rental income town hall, that's something we need to talk about in May as well, because staff had put together a proposal for us on town hall rental and town hall usage and et cetera. We need to look at that and make a final determination. The previous council had made a directive to the town manager on how it should run. Staff has now come back to us with some other suggestions on that. Anyway, $2,000 seems to be a decent placeholder. We can look at that policy in May if everybody's akin to doing that. The next page, proper money, seeing no foreseeable developmental residential development. Did I miss something?
It's on the proper
Well,
on page
sorry.
1.
Oh,
I'm using my printout from this afternoon, I apologize. The next line item, proper money, 3161503. Seeing no foreseeable residential development, I don't see any income coming in there this year. Gifts and donations, kind of forward thinking there, maybe we can get some, and I just put, our actuals this year through the quarter were $1,250, I just put $1,500 as a placeholder. And sale of salvage and surplus property, who knows, there might be some on the other one or this one?
Back to proffers.
Yes, sir.
I'm new at this. Are there proffers for commercial stuff?
Not typically.
Okay.
Back up to sale and salvage, my thought process was with the relocation of the PD and possible salvage property that may not need to be relocated over here, maybe there would be some, maybe there wouldn't be some. I just put $1,000 as a placeholder there, simply because we have a salvage property surplus sales policy. Who knows, we might find something to sell.
Okay.
May not, but just placeholder.
Oh, the house.
What'd you say?
It's at the house.
We can sell the CSI.
$2,000 is way too much.
The next one that I added a category to was interest on bank deposits, that we had initial staff budget of 0. I put that at $1,000 based on the current interest rate that we're getting. If the money stayed there for the full year, it was like $1,500. But if I'm not mistaken, we're supposed to start the streetscape project July, August, based on Holly's timeline. So we're going to be spending a lot of money, so we're not going to earn as much interest. So line item 3150101, interest on bank deposits, I just put it $1,000, thinking that would be somewhat realistic, depending on how quickly we got reimbursed. The other issues that Jen is going to still consider or look at, there are 3 line items, 3240104, going back up an inch and a half there. Disaster Recovery State Grant, and then below it a couple lines, Disaster Recovery Federal Grant, and right below that, Insurance Recovery. Kept them all as 0 because I don't know really how you can plan for that. But that being said, Jen also has claims pending that we may not realize this year. So when it gets closer to final adoption of the budget, if we haven't received monies for claims, but we think we shall, we can then throw them in the budget if necessary. So that being said, after those changes, now I have 2. After those changes, prior to Steve's changes on the expense side for the PD, that left us with about a $266,000 surplus in revenues, which will actually go up a little bit because Marsh Johnson will give us a little bit better real numbers on the developmental revenue. But I think for the sake of argument's sake tonight, we can use $250,000 as a cushion if we're padding anything in the expense category, which I admit I ran out of time to do today with Jen and Rebecca. One of the things was assigned to Steve, and Steve has done it, and I'll go through those. Since I've already done it, I'll go through it with you guys if you want on the public safety side. And then we'll jump back to wherever anybody wants to jump back. Because I didn't start at expenses. I haven't looked at those deeply. I wanted to try to get revenues under grasp. And really, honestly, other than what Steve has, unless someone has something pressing on the expense side, I think we can skip and do that next. But revenues, if no one has any arguments over what we've done, I think the next work session we can focus on expenses after we go through what Steve has already shown tonight.
One quick thing, one new thing on expenses. Should we not add more to the legal column now?
That is one of my many different comments to discuss, which, again, we will know more about probably in the coming weeks.
Just want to make sure.
That's going to more than double.
Oh, yes,
At
absolutely.
least.
Which last year I had originally proposed almost $100,000 because we didn't know what was happening, and we thought there was going to be litigation with the streetscape, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We wound up toning it down to, I think, 80. I think 80 would be conservative this year, given the fact that I think council may be leaning towards the options we discussed in closed session, and the cost. We've been getting a pretty sweet deal of what we had, but I think in reality we need to be prepared to be paying more.
Right.
So
Okay.
based on our directive to staff and to Rebecca tonight, we'll have more firm numbers on that guesstimates next time.
All right. Just want to make sure that was on the radar.
That being said, police department, page 4 of 9 on the new spreadsheet, there's a couple items there that said Steve will talk to chief. One of those items, 2 of those items had to do with maintenance service contracts. Essentially, that came down to the copy machine that we have now subsequently found out through research that we are leasing a pretty substantial machine down there. It's costing us quite a small fortune between maintenance costs and lease costs. It was suggested by staff in town hall that we could probably buy a machine cheaper. Steve has talked to Jim and Greg about it, talked to, I guess, Donna about it. They have no objections to that. He has gotten preliminary estimates that will discount that quite a bit. He's still in the research phase. That being said, the maintenance service contracts, the repairs and maintenance services, which one, Steve? Maintenance servicing contracts, he wants to put at $1,200, not for the copier, but because we're incurring quite a few expenses on our radio communications. And one of the things that I talked to Steve about, the chief about, that Steve and Chief and Greg have already talked about, is signing up for a maintenance plan with an authorized Motorola repair. Their first preliminary estimate is coming in about $1,200, and he will get some more information in the coming weeks on that for us. But so we changed that $675 for item number 320 to $1,200. Advertising, we were going to keep at $500. We were curious what it had to advertise, and that answer was things like National Night Out and the bicycle rodeo, et cetera, which, apparently we didn't do much advertising this year, or we got grant money for it. There still might potentially be grant money, but it doesn't hurt to have an advertising budget. We had actually thought about adding some more money to that based on the fact that if we ever had to hire a new police officer, it's outrageously expensive to hire a want ad. So we may want to still consider that.
Well, we talked about that at the last meeting and
Right.
decided that, or at least my understanding, we decided that going through the Virginia VML, which
It's
we've
free.
done before, is free, and we're such a small jurisdiction that it doesn't seem to be too hard to find somebody.
Right. In my conversation, I had a brief one with Jim on that after that meeting was, but if we advertise more, would we get more candidates? And would we have a better selection to choose from versus just the people who may go in the PML category?
You're
And his
correct.
suggestion is yes. So assuming we have more money to deal with, we can still talk about padding that later. But 500 for now is what you want to stick with just for
Yes.
that. And you and I,
For
we can talk. For
non,
non-employee staff.
correct.
Going down to equipment rental, that money, a lot of that has to do with the copy machine as well. Item number 5400. Steve talked to Chief, wants to drop that down to $500. The logic there is that Steve and I were talking that probably we could give a directive to Jim that we're going to go in the procedure of getting a replacement unit for that or terminating our lease. In the chance that we don't terminate the lease by the end of the fiscal year and or buy a copier by the end of the fiscal year, this would give a little breathing room to still rent the copier that we have while we buy a new one, get it installed, get it hooked up, which, again, that all may be terminated as far as an issue here with the relocation, should it happen between now and June 30th, 2013. But it doesn't hurt to have $500. Who knows if they have to, I know right now when they need to move stuff, occasionally they're borrowing one of the officers' family's trailer. But heaven forbid they need to borrow a trailer or rent a trailer or whatever,
In regards to moving that copier, if it is leased, you have to call the actual owner of that to move it. You're
Right.
not allowed to move that ourselves.
Right.
That I know for sure.
Repair and maintenance supplies, nothing was there, $500 there. The thought process was if we buy a copier that is sub $1,500, we probably will not, depending upon the cost, buy a maintenance contract on it. Short of, if you bought a top-of-the-line copier from Best Buy, you can buy the 3-year maintenance for $69 or whatever. But the odds, the thing is there, we'd probably try to replace it or repair it ourselves. If it was too cost prohibitive, then Chief could come to us and say, look, our $1,500 copier is going to cost us $1,000 to repair. I can buy a new one for $1,100. What are we going to do? So we just put a placeholder there of $500. And then the last thing that Steve wanted to update was item number 8101, capital outlay machinery and equipment. That we were increasing the $10,000 so far to $12,000. With that being the replacement money for
The copier,
the copier machine.
actual buying the
Yes,
copier.
actual buying the copier, giving him a high rent, he thinks obviously he can get it cheaper, but that includes that. The only consideration there is on the CIP, the capital improvements plan that the planning commission forwarded, which Steve and I have talked about, there are 3 requests that we could fund in this line item category. Items 3, 4, and 5, the radar replacements, the in-car computers, and the in-car cameras. My question to Steve before we decide to fund any of that is, what's wrong with what we have? If we have them, what's wrong with them? And that was really my only question. And so if we have radar and they're still tuning them properly and they're still working and they're still getting readings and they're accurate readings, why do we need to replace them? Versus if we have 2 broke ones, yeah, it makes sense. I know the in-car computers need upgrading, so that's almost a no-brainer. We almost have to do that. So that part's easy. The in-car cameras, I'm not for sure if all the cars have them now or not. Is this a additional, are we replacing 2 that we already have that work okay but they're not state-of-the-art? Or are we putting 2 in cars that don't currently have them because we don't have them? Those are my questions to Steve on that, and if anybody knows the answer for 100% certain, may you speak now or forever hold your peace. I have no problem going with the computers, as long as that's a good number, we can easily bump that up. And just have
I'll get answers for the next meeting.
Yeah, so those 3 categories I have no problems with. The other stuff, the telephone system, the security system, the lockers, that's all part of moving, because it sounds like that's the avenue we're going down. Apparently the tasers and shots, that's already been taken care of according to Steve. And the driveway repair replacement is no longer a problem for the police department there's a problem for the town when we decide what to do with that property.
Signage, capital, or a line item?
Signage for them to be relocated here. Good question. We could probably fit it in a couple different categories. We could very easily just add a sign out there where our tenants are. We could make a new sign for, I personally think that part of the new rebranding of the town center that they're doing, I think we need to come up with something that says that this is town hall other than the little 8x10 that we have above the door. The police department, same type of thing, whether it's a directional thing at the entranceway, whether it's, I think that's going to be part of the capital plan. As far as where we put the budget in there for that, we can find a spot for it, town center, property maintenance, whatever. We can, I don't think putting a sign for the PD should be, well, maybe it should be, attributed to their department. Maybe it should. Yes, ma'am.
Number 8 on the general government was town signage, and we had, when we were keeping the PD there, a department sign there and one for town hall, but we were going to work with our master plan people on where we could go ahead and put it out there.
That also includes all the different entryway signs
Yes.
that Ken Lewison has been talking about with the ARB and
Yes.
stuff. So, yeah, I mean, signage is something that we're going to have to remaster piece together anyway. But we can, once we get the signage budget and figure out how much money we're going to spend, we can attribute it to whoever we got to attribute it to. Kind of like what Steve and I were talking about, some of these supply categories for the PD, I think we could actually ring it in, especially once they come to where they're within walking distance, and it's pretty easy. You know, when staff here orders 2 cases of copier paper, it doesn't make sense for Donna to order a case of copier paper from another vendor, or even the same vendor. I mean, we could order all at once, and then we could just distribute it amongst, it wouldn't be that much harder for record keeping to be, if Jen orders 3 cases of black pens, and Donna comes over and she needs a case of black pens, we give her one, then 1/3 of the cost goes to PD supplies. So I just think there's some cost savings to be had, again, by relocating them up here, just from a simplicity standpoint.
I agree.
Okay,
So that's really the only expense category that we've talked about, other than there's another one that we need to adjust, and that is the planning. I don't have the line item for that.
Go back to the police on the
Oh.
empty ones that are on the ones like for furniture and fixtures. If they're moving over here, I'm going to assume they're going to need some new furniture.
And earlier in the conversation, we had dialogued about, we're going to have to get with Jim and Greg on a relocation budget, and a lot of that could be part of that relocation budget.
Right, and what are the bunch
Just-
on the books,
just-
educational and other?
I'm sorry, I was trying to answer your first question before you so nicely asked me a second one. So the continuing answer to your first question is that once we figure out what we may need, we'll have better numbers for that.
Yeah, you had answered that.
And a lot of
Didn't
that,
know I finished answering.
a lot of that money could come out of this fiscal year.
Absolutely.
For the move and that.
What was your second question, Kat?
The books, the educational, recreational, and other, those are just blank.
Give me the line numbers, please.
Though, 6012, 6013 on page 5, they were blank this year also.
Yeah,
I
that-
think these are.
Those are
things-
categories that we could have stricken out. If Jen and I went through this page by page like we
Yeah.
did the revenues, educational, recreational, we can strip out. Some of these things we can strip out in some of these other categories too, such as maintenance of general buildings and grounds, vehicle, powered fuels. We don't have any vehicles and powered fuels for general maintenance. So that's something that Jen and I will be working on between now and the next time we all get together, to strip out the miscellaneous line items that we don't need. The software program is just so robust.
It's a nice way of putting it.
Their dues and memberships cover the police academy, that's where the education stuff is.
So
Okay.
where's Marshawn at?
Oh, yes, well, we have to go back and tweak another 2 line items to cover him also. But Marchand is 3130 on page 8 of 9.
Rebecca and I both talked to Marchand in depth about his continuing expansion of his role here because he is such a valuable resource.
I'm sorry, I don't see 3130.
It's under planning commission.
Other contractual services, Marchand.
Oh,
2 inches
got it.
from the top of the page. He thinks he's probably going to come in, if things stay as they are currently right now, he thinks he's going to come in about $2,000 over budget this year. But we've thrown some other stuff at him, so that's kind of understandable. He is certainly a contractor that I don't question anything about any of his invoices ever. I know how hard he works and how diligent he is. That being said, we've thrown a lot of things at him, and I think his duties are just going to continue to escalate up and probably be even more of a valuable resource. We've already padded it to $15,000 for next year, and Rebecca and I talked to him. He gave me a true estimate. His best guess, if nothing else changed other than what he's currently doing now, of $17,500. Rebecca and I agreed that we should probably pop that up to about $20,000 because, quite honestly, I could see him doing more.
Yeah.
So that is a category that we can modify.
Now, since council had had the discussion when we were doing the town manager scope of work, and all of us were in agreement of Marchant taking on the duties of zoning administrator. The caveat to that for Marchant is he has to be changed from a contract employee to a part-time employee, so he's covered under our insurance.
Right.
So we need to tweak those two line items. Our hiccup is, since we are changing this from a contracted employee to a part-time employee, we have to advertise the position. Lisa had said that since it was changing from a contract to a part-time, that we needed to advertise the position.
Then why don't we direct staff to advertise the position for free on the VML website with all applications and letters of interest due by...
Thursday. No.
7 a.m.
Due by April the 30th, April the 29th.
Can we do that in this session?
We can direct.
We can direct. Why don't we
Okay, I
direct
just wanna make
staff to
sure we're not going
advertise
off base here.
with a due date of April the 29th so that we can discuss any letters at the work session of the 30th? And would someone be so kind as to let Marchant know that he needs to have it to apply? Or send a letter of interest?
I've already.
And then Jen can, based on the $20,000 number at his current rate of pay, Jen can extrapolate Social Security, FICA,
We did.
Medicare, and all that stuff. Well, but Steve also has a, that's not a number that we need to change right now tonight,
Okay.
because Steve and I want to talk about overtime stuff too.
Okay.
So the whole payroll numbers may be changing next time we all come together anyway.
All right.
Do you want me to change this to 20 though for now?
Please.
Yes.
And that's really all the expenses that we've really come up with. Going back, Jen and I will get together and strike out any miscellaneous line items that don't belong based on things that we don't use or don't do. The only other point of discussion that I'd leave you with to think about for now is kind of going back to the software issue with the accounting software and what we do with that position. Been pondering this for a while, and honestly, I think that given the fact that the town manager candidates that we interviewed and potentially may be hiring don't have a strong accounting background, there's a couple things that I think we ought to consider doing, and I just leave this with thoughts for you guys to ponder, not really need to discuss tonight unless someone really finds a need. I think we need to do two things. Number one is educate our staff and offer tuition for our staff for courses to help them in fundamental accounting, government accounting, so that their understanding of the more complex program can hopefully make more sense. I'm not trying to insult it, but Jennifer, my words may not be correct, but Jen knows what I'm trying to say. The problem is not the fact that the software can't do what we want it to do. The problem is that our staff doesn't properly, fully understand the concepts that are necessary to run the software. There's two solutions to that, and I think you have to do both. Because they are the day-to-day operators of the software, I think we need to extend to them the courtesy of sending them for training for that software. And I've actually already asked Jen to start looking at this and coming up with some ideas of what's available, where it's available, what's it going to cost. Is it a NOVA class? Is it a class of a community? Is it somebody coming in for 2 weeks? Whatever it is. But adjusting their work hours to allow them to take a class. In other words, if they have to take a 4 o'clock class till 6 o'clock at night, I don't want to have to pay them necessarily overtime. But then they can come in and work from 8 to 6 or whatever it is. That's step one, is educating the current staff a little bit more about something we're now asking them to do that wasn't ever part of their job to begin with. Number two, I think we really need to go back to consider, and I kind of wanted to wait for the new town manager, but given the fact that our current candidates don't have a strong background in this anyway, I think it's going to be kind of a need. I think we need to consider advertising and retaining the services of someone who is trained in the software system as a CFO, similar to what we had when James Naratsky was filling that role, and kind of take some of that workload off of the clerks, which they don't really need to have or to be doing. And I just think that it's going to behoove the town to have a professional accounting person who either A, knows the system, or B, can learn the system that we've decided to adopt. And the sooner we can advertise for that position, the better. My suggestion would be to advertise the position, we can discuss that in May, advertise the position at a rate equal to what we were paying James upon his departure, strongly needing a background in government accounting software, obviously, and or this software system. And I would like to try to get that person in place if we can find a candidate prior to the end of the fiscal year. If we can find a candidate, if council's amenable to it, et cetera. In this particular year's budget, we have room in the line items for not only professional accounting services, but employees in general. My thought process is similar to what we used to do with James, make this a 15 to 20 hour week position. Have the town manager work with that person to determine their schedule. You know, if we cut checks every Friday, obviously that person needs to come in on Thursday and get everything ready, or come in on Friday, and then maybe one other day, you know, if they work Tuesday and Thursday, or Monday, Wednesday, or whatever they work, town manager and staff can figure that one out. But I really think that it would behoove us to have a strong accounting person here, in addition to sending staff for some education on the basics and fundamentals of what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, so that that person's job isn't compounded by, here's a million questions we have for you. So that's just some food for thought. I mean, if anybody has a question of it right now, I'd be happy to entertain it, but I really would like to dive into that a little bit more in May. However, in an attempt to not dive into it too deep in May, I would really like anybody that has any real questions to contact me beforehand, so I can hopefully appease those minds beforehand.
Do you see this as a temporary position
No.
once we get the staff up to speed?
No, I don't. James, there were certain things that James did that town staff didn't do. There were certain things that we wish James would have done that town staff didn't do. That was one of the problems that we had with that previous person in the position. I think that if we can bring in a town manager and at the same time bring in a CFO, CPA, whatever, I think the two of them hopefully could work out details provided of what's expected. This is what we need, this is what we want, given our recommendations to those people as well. I see it as a permanent part-time gig. Heaven forbid the town grows, could eventually maybe turn into a position that is a full-time treasurer's position. You know, I would foresee this person taking, you know, currently we have Sherry being the tax collector, so to speak. She's the one that goes after delinquent accounts. She's the one that goes after delinquent taxes. That would then revert back to this person's job, similar to what it was when it was James's job. I see this as a permanent part-time,
Okay.
certainly. Depending upon how big our budget gets in the next 5 to 10 years, next councils can make that decision, or whether or not we have a true commissioner of revenue, so to speak. And that may be the direction that the town grows. Who knows? I mean, with development that's still yet to come in this town and the surrounding area, potential boundary line adjustments, potential anything. You never.
Annexation.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I don't think annexation is going to ever happen, but not in Councilman Kenworthy's
I
lifetime.
didn't see the
Anyway.
money in here for that either.
But to answer your question is no, it's not temporary. I don't think.
All right, that's all I want to know.
And when Gene and I made the recommendations to council that we terminate that position, the thought process was Gene was going to help evaluate as to whether or not we needed a replacement for that position. One of the last conversations I had with Gene was, I think we do, and he thought we did. But that's kind of where it died,
All right,
because that position was terminated, so.
fair enough.
Okay, any thoughts? Nope.
cat's halfway raising her hand.
No.
Motion adjourned.
There you go.
Second.
All right.
Out of here.
Jay,
Yes, sir.
when do you want to chat about OPEB?
About, whenever Jim's in town, we can